Okay, so here's our first group discussion. I'm Amanda Brickhouse. I coach and teach at Roswell High School. If you guys want to take turns introducing yourselves, then now's the time.
I'm Tyler Crane. I coach football and golf at Phoenix City High School here in Alabama. Originally from Gaston, Alabama, but we've moved down here, got an opportunity to coach at a great program, so see where everything goes now.
I'll go next. I'm Matt McCarthy. I actually just switched over to Roswell High School as well, so I did not know Amanda before this program, but now she's my boss. I teach PE at Roswell High School. I'm the head baseball coach, head softball coach, and I will be there this upcoming year.
Awesome.
My name is Jamie Ammons, and I'm the head baseball coach at Ware County High School. And I've been here. This is my fourth year, and I've been down in South Georgia now for this is my 10th year in coaching. So I'm excited to see what you guys have to bring to this discussion group. We're from different areas in Georgia, so I'm excited.
Awesome. All right, I'm last, I guess. My name is Champ Young. I teach over here at Eastside High School. I coach boys soccer, the head varsity coach there. And I also, unfortunately, cannot teach PE, but I teach ninth grade biology. Been here for now 9 years, going into year 10, and trying to figure out what virtual learning really is.
Champ, I do have to interrupt you or interject. I did teach biology before I was a head baseball coach. So
I love it, man. I love it. So can have real conversations. You don't have to bounce balls.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm in PE now, K through 2, so pretty excited about that.
You got a lab coat. You better get a lab coat.
All right, y'all, let's just dive in. Matt, if you want to start.
Yeah, I did. I guess I'm taking the lead for the Human Expectations article by, I guess it's Wrongman and Igerholm. I always say that wrong. I wrote down a couple of notes, and I wanted to get y'all's opinions about it. The first thing that was kind of surprising me was talking about humor and how they really haven't done a ton of research on it in the past, and now it's kind of becoming a thing. But I was going to see if anyone else was kind of surprised by that. It didn't really become relevant, the authors said, until later on in the 80s and 90s, and I was going to see if that was surprising to you guys at all.
It was definitely surprising to me. I didn't really look at humor as a strategy that you could use in coaching. I knew that I, laughed with my kids sometimes, but as far as it being a strategy that should be taught and taken seriously and, know when to use it in an appropriate way, I never thought about it like that.
Yeah, I think the same thing. So like situational humor is what you're kind of referring to there, Amanda. No, I use it. I think it's one of those things where they kind of refer to it as almost breaking the ice, but I never thought of it really as a certain methodology as to how it's supposed to go about.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, trying to understand when to use humor and when not to use humor. Like, when is the right time? When is it okay to, tell a joke, and when is it okay to, kind of make sure that you're staying serious in that situation. It's always been kind of tough when you think about it.
Well, I think the whole thing that you guys are hitting on right there is the fact that we got to know our players, and that's what the author's saying when there's a time and a place. But you also got to know your surroundings and where you're at and how they respond. I think part of what the author's trying to say is if you hear something, do you acknowledge it or do you, just keep it, kind of hidden? But at the same time, it is our responsibility if we hear something that's derogatory, because so much of this humor can be turned into bullying really quick. And bullying is a key word that you all are familiar with that just, once that word, cyber, are they Snapchatting each other, pictures of things of somebody that's not physically fit, that kind of thing. So that's where us as coaches have to sit back and just analyze, are we handling are we observing, and when's the right time for us to interject and put our mark on it?
And that's what Jamie, that's exactly what they're saying, basically, saying that, you got to know your athletes, you got to know when to use it, what kind of humor is going to be successful with your group. So that's what the authors were talking about. They really, and there was a ton of information in this article, but I did want to focus on the 4 main roles. The first one that they said was social identity and belonging. I could definitely see this being important in a group atmosphere. I mean, you make someone laugh, all of a sudden that player is now involved in the group rather than if you just keep it completely silent in the group. And I was going to see, have any of you guys, I know we can't talk about our experiences, but would you, I guess, use that in your coaching at all or no?
I think I would definitely use it because when you're coaching, just things happen, in a practice that nobody ever expected, and it's funny, And as a coach, you can either decide to laugh with your kids because they're going to laugh anyway, or you can decide to, drop the hammer and, get back on track or whatnot. So I think being able to pick out those opportunities to use that to your advantage to bond with your kids is good, because in the reading it said too that it's a double-edged sword. So it can create that sense of belonging, but at the same time it can cause kids to feel like they're outsiders if they're not a part of that laughter or whatever that situation was. So I think it is kind of delicate knowing when to use it. But I think that sharing a laugh with your kids is absolutely a way to create that belonging and a good atmosphere.
Absolutely, because we want our kids to have fun. At the end of the day, that's the main thing, is making sure they're having fun. We're still getting work done, and we're getting better at what we're doing, but it's got to be around some form of fun. Like, we take all the fun out of it and there's no humor, it's not a game anymore, it's a job. So
well, that's what and there's other categories too, or the other rules, but like Tyler said, with I guess the second one's tension regulation. If you simply, if it's about a job and they're trying to play high school sports, it's just probably not going to work, right? So you use humor to keep them involved, keep them to enjoy the sport. Not every single kid you have is going to go play college football, baseball, soccer, whatever the sport is. So just keep them involved, keep them enjoying the sport. So I completely see tension regulation. That's probably the number one thing for me personally, as why humor would be an option. And I was going to get y'all's opinion on that as well.
How far away? So the definition was stress relieving nature. So I'm trying to read my notes here on the other screen. I got 2 going. But also not even just trying to identify like a group mentality there, but also in pressure situations where everyone's all tense or everyone is on edge, and then developing just a kind of a laugh to make the situation not so much light of it, but to ease the tension in that sense.
I agree with that. The third one was creativity. I didn't understand that as well. That was kind of the most confusing one to me, I guess I would say. I wrote that the authors wrote that creative and innovative thinking is essential to performance enhancement. So I was going to honestly get y'all's opinion about how you think humor creates, I guess, creative and innovative thinking. And I know the authors talked about that, but I love some more of y'all's feedback, I guess.
Well, I personally think that the creativity part is it goes into the, if I feel inferior to you, then I'm going to try to be more creative than you and like outsmart you, so to speak. So I think creative and intelligence is interchangeable here in the discussion that the author's trying to say is I'm going to outsmart you, and I'm going to try really hard to make you feel like a DA. And me being, I'll be a smart ass, so for lack of better words, so that you understand that, you know what, you may be better than me, but at the same place, I'm gonna put you in your place.
No, I completely get that. That covers almost all. And the fourth one is power relations. this is one thing that was interesting to me because I've read other articles on this too, especially a sarcastic coach, I guess is what they say. A lot of athletes don't enjoy sarcasm. So obviously you have to use you got to use humor as far as, is it hurting the athletes? Is it helping the athletes? I was going to get you guys' opinions on if humor is establishing roles as a coach to a player, or do you think it really is not that involved with it? It's just kind of a, like Amanda mentioned, it's kind of a double-edged sword. It can help, or actually it could help an athlete check out. So I was going to see what you guys thought about. Do you think humor creates power relations, like the authors mentioned?
Personally, I think that one and creativity kind of goes hand in hand, because as a coach, we're constantly trying to find what makes our guys tick, And once we realize, hey, this guy needs to be laughing and having fun and to be at his best. This guy over here, he needs to be, locked in, serious. He can't goof around because his focus goes away. So as coaches, not only are we responsible for the X's and O's part, but we're responsible for finding a way mentally to get our guys ready. And if that's with humor, if that's with making sure they're staying on point, we have to make sure that we do a good job of that. And I think, when we talk about power relations and stuff like that, it is absolutely a big part of what we do each and every day.
Yeah, and that's what Tyler, we're not talking about experiences, but I'll just say coaching a baseball team yesterday, some of them relate to humor and it's all good. Some of them are upset about losing and going crazy. You just got to know your athlete. So I'm not talking about experiences. I'm just saying you have to know your athlete. You got to know who relates to what and go from there. But some athletes are so hard on themselves that humor will help them out, and then some athletes just don't want to hear it at all. So I think that's important. And there was a ton of other topics on this, or whatever.
Well, hold on. Let me say this. I'm gonna piggyback what you just said, because another baseball perspective. All right, you ready?
Yeah.
Here's where I go from. There's a time and a place for you to say, "Hey, man, did you see anything at the plate today? I mean, you swung over the top of that curveball the entire time." And and he may say, "Coach, I forgot my contacts," or I didn't stay at my parents' house last night, so I didn't get my contacts. So we don't know exactly what's going on. So the humor of me asking him in a joking way may make light of the situation when I really don't know what's going on. And then a kid's going to tell you, because they're already going to be hard on themselves. So at that point you say, "Well, gosh darn it, don't forget your contact. Don't text you at 6:30 in the morning," and then we go from there. So, I think that's the example of when can we and when can we not. But you got to know which player you can, and then you can't.
Right.
No, I agree with that too. I've actually had a player tell me that he forgot his contacts before. So we're just the same boat right there, man. But no, definitely that's it for the article. I wrote just a simple note that I said I liked how the authors mentioned that humor can help you navigate through the waters throughout the season, which is very true. If you have no humor as a coach, I don't know how you survive. That's my opinion. But then everything else, I thought it was a really good article. And that's it for me. You guys, we can move on to the next
one. All right, let's see. All right, Jamie, do you want to tackle chapter 20?
Yes, chapter 20 talked about the authors or the coach's expectancy for the players. And basically what I got from the chapter is that it's talking about the expectancy theory, in which states that a stimulus to behavior causes behavior comes true. So what they're saying is that if you expect something as a coach and you have that bias, you form that bias, and it becomes true, is that the way it happens? What do y'all think?
I'm going to go ahead and go first. This was the hardest article for me to read. I literally didn't really even understand it at first, so I had to read it a second time. But part of me kind of admitted there's a lot of expectations when you go into tryouts or anything, and I think certain athletes are pretty good or not. And then I had to look at myself. I think I give some people a pass and expect them to be good long run for me in the season when they're probably not that good. Or I just assume they were good based off their travel ball or whatever. So I know we're not talking experiences, but I think it's the thing that all coaches need to look at because it's definitely there. So that's all I have to say about that.
I totally agree. Like you said, not talking experience or stuff, but coming into a program that's played for 2 state championships back-to-back years, there's a lot of expectancy throughout the community, throughout players, throughout coaches, and that brings a lot of pressure on people. But again, if you practice to be a champion, if you carry yourself as a champion, you do all the little things right. Those expectations that you set for yourself can, and most of the time will come true if you do it the right way.
I think this I don't know, this article to me kind of hit on like just your human nature. If you're watching a tryout and then you've created this team and there's some kids that you're just going to have high expectations for. It's just, I feel like it's human nature to have high expectations for some and maybe not so high expectations for others. I think the feedback is the key because, your high expectancy kids, the quality of feedback that you're giving them is probably different than the quality of feedback you're giving your low expectancy kids. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I don't know if I necessarily agree because I may have high expectations for this kid, and that's to score 20 points a game in basketball. And the same kid a different kid on the same team, I may have high expectations for them, and it's just to, hit 2 free throws at any point in the game. Like, the expectations can be high, but I think they're relative to each kid. Right. So, I don't know. To me, there was like a little gray area where I wanted them to say, the caveat here is the expectations are relative to which kid you're talking about. Because my high expectations for player A may be different than my high expectations for player B. So I don't know, but I do think it's the feedback matters, and I think that is what affects the performance at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Amanda, you took all my buzzwords. So the gray area is what I was kind of referring to or thinking of as well, because the feedback, I think, is what's so crucial as to how you get to the end goal. So if we're trying to get, like you said, 20 points this kid versus maybe 20 minutes of playing time, how we get them there is going to be very different amongst the two players or people. A lot of it's just understanding context, understanding what their abilities are, and then having, like you said, even realistic expectations of what they can and cannot do.
Moving forward, the author goes on to explain a 4-step cycle. So in step 1, it talks about the coaches making the initial assessment, and based on the cues you get from your initial impression, do they, influence your expectation level that you have for that kid? And then step 2, talk about the initial assessment, determining how you treat that athlete at that point. And then are they, as a head coach, it talks about further, if you're a head coach, you only talk to the players that you expect high expectations from. I mean, the assistants take over the lowest expectations kids. How do you guys feel about that? Because I feel like as a head coach, I want to get to know every one of my players and not necessarily just the ones that are going to impact me. Now, as the head coach, obviously, my emphasis sometimes is varsity. And so when I can get the opportunity to go to a JV practice, I make the most of it. But at the same time, who's going to bust with me? The varsity kids,
I'm honest first. I'll go ahead. So I think a lot of it is with that initial assessment. I'm going to try my best not to speak from personal experience, but when we have tryouts or there's initial time for them to impress me, I try to bring in someone that has no idea who these kids are, so I get a brand new perspective. Or if that kid is, I've known them since they were little, I try to make sure I keep it as concrete as possible. That also being said, when I do have that time, because it is realistic. I mean, to be honest, if you coach varsity, you're going to only communicate probably with, I know our sport has 11 kids on the field. communicate with probably the first 11, maybe 14 more than I'm going to talk to this 17th, 18th kid on the bench. I'm just to be honest. That's just the nature of the beast. But that also being said, when you kind of referred to it, Jamie, I have to be intentional with my timing. I have to be intentional with my conversations. I need to get to know those kids. I need to get to know what it is that kind of makes them tick. And sometimes that's a little more than just rolling the ball out there and watching them train. Sometimes I have to talk to them on the side a little bit too and understand kind of what makes them go, what kind of drives them a little bit as well.
Right. Well, and that's the thing, like you're saying, you have, a soccer team, usually you have, 20 players most of the time sometimes. Well, in football, a lot of times, especially at the higher levels, we have up to 120, 130 kids. And so you have to do your due diligence and making sure that you do evaluate each kid, whether it's a ninth grader who's just coming on or a 10th grader. You have to make sure that you're going through the steps of getting to know as many kids as possible while also evaluating what they can do. And a lot of times, especially with the things that are going on in the world now, you might only have an hour to do that. So you have to make sure that you're on top of things and, you're trying to get to know the kids as much as possible to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I would say I think the situation varies, and I know it's about coaching, and I do high school, and I try to get to know every single kid in our high school, especially for tryouts and everything. For travel ball, I would say it's the complete opposite. You have 2 hours to meet some of these kids. So it sounds kind of terrible, but the people that you expect to perform, those are the ones that you kind of prefer right away. So high school, you got what you got. I love all those athletes, and I try to get to know them as soon as I can. Travel ball, I feel like you do have to base it off of who's better, and it sounds bad, but that's kind of whoever you expect the most of. That's who you're going to show preferential treatment to.
And Jamie, I want to say something about step 2. You mentioned, so step 2 says the initial assessment determines how a coach treats athletes. Like, I had a problem with the word treats, that the author used the word treats. I don't really know what that means. Does that mean how much attention I give the athlete, how many reps I give the athlete, how many times I have a one-on-one, conversation with them, what kind of feedback? That's kind of blurry to me because I think it ties in with the head coach, assistant coach thing. Because because as a head coach,
I totally agree with what you're saying. Because the word treat to me is, it's ambiguous. And so, for example, we only have one field. So talking about reps and what does the coach do when do I treat that player differently because he's got a game tomorrow, whether it's JV varsity? I don't know. I'm not talking about past experiences, but I'm just talking about how do you literally schedule practices based on facilities and all that kind of stuff based on your expectations. Well, expectations for your program is to be successful. Any coach, it doesn't matter what level, if we're talking about, varsity, JV, 9th grade, 8th grade, middle school, it doesn't matter. So who gets priority? Well, if the expectation is this and the expectation is that, how do we treat the athlete? I understand exactly what you're saying about that ambiguous word the author uses.
Because
I took it as, so I kind of combine step 2 and 3. So, for example, if your star running back fumbles in practice, you kind of pull them aside like, hey, man, we got Friday coming up. Let's not do that. Versus, the freshman walk on that, we're going to probably chew him a new one. So I think it's, treats is a broad word that I don't know. That's a pretty wide paintbrush there that we're painting with.
That's how I took treat champ as well.
It is, but I think it ties into Jamie asked one of the steps, or that says that the head coach and the assistant coach have different expectations, or their expectancy is different. But I think that ties into that because I don't know if y'all have been an assistant coach, but assistant coaches, you have a certain role. Your role is different than the head coach, and so the head coach feels the pressure to win. And if we're going to play our rival tomorrow, then I need these certain kids that are going to play the most minutes to get the most reps, to get the most attention. why would I give the most attention and the most reps or even the same amount of reps to a kid who I know is not getting in the game? So I just, it depends. But do I love that kid? Of course. Am I going to talk to that kid every day? Of course. So I just think the pressures and the purpose of the positions are different, and that leads to how they treat their athletes are different. But does that mean reps? I don't know what that means. So,
well, I think that's what I was alluding to in the head coach and the assistant coach part of this conversation, or part of this reading, is the fact that my assistant coaches are going to be able to get data and present me with data when I can sit back. And, I'm not saying that I coach from the press box, but if I want to sit in the press box and observe practice, Johnny can't get it done, then I can see that. But the assistant coach may want to bring the head coach. Well, Johnny didn't get this. He fielded 2 out of 5 ground balls at third base today. And I think that's where the assistant coach and the head coach differs, but that's also the good cop, bad cop conversation that everyone can have. If you're an assistant coach and your head coach is getting on somebody, well, you got to be the good guy and go, pat him on the back, and then the head coach can, vice versa. So, step 4 talks about the performances, confirm the coach's initial assessment. Well, I think it's fluid, especially me as a head coach. If I label you as a JV player, you're not stuck on JV for 4 years. You're not stuck on JV the entire year. So how does that, when you see them at tryouts and X or Johnny, let's use Johnny. Johnny has some skill set. How are we, do we leave him at JV because he's a ninth grader?
No, I would say there's so many coaches that have been initially wrong. I'm sure we've all been initially wrong. There's always athletes that are going to prove you wrong. There's always athletes that are going to prove you right. I mean, that's just the nature of it. But as far as when I was thinking of step 4, I'm like, step 4 kind of seems like a 50% success rate to me, just because I'm sure we've all seen athletes, coached athletes, done everything that they'll end up showing you in the end that they're pretty dang good.
I think this is a question for Michael Jordan's JV coach.
There you go.
And we'll ask him if he watched The Last Dance a few weeks ago. It's that. I think as a coach, I think that your first impression matters, and it's okay to kind of put a kid in a category with the idea that this kid can prove me wrong. I'm looking for this kid to prove me wrong. I'm hoping they prove me wrong. I think you have to kind of have that in the back of your head.
Right. And sometimes it just takes longer for it to click with some kids. You can go over and over and over and over with, specific things to do, and then you say it one different way and a light bulb comes on, and now that kid understands that he's doing it better than anybody else.
Well, Tyler, part of what you're just saying is part of what the author's saying is that it may take longer for it to click, but as a coach, when you realize that it's taking longer, you don't talk to that kid. You're talking to the, top of the line. You're talking to the beginning players, and you're leaving him to figure it out on his own. And the head coach that's been in this,
you know what I'm saying? As coaches, we have to make sure that we're not that person.
And I learned that lesson after being an assistant coach, after I've been a head coach.
Right.
So, you pick up that slack for that head coach and for that player when you realize that, maybe that's human nature, like Amanda said. This is human nature. Human nature is to, you're gonna draw yourself to the ones that you're directly influencing.
Absolutely. But at the same time, just like anything else, if you are going to be successful as a coach, you have to make sure that not only are you working with the ones that get it now, but eventually you've got to make sure that you're giving these guys that are younger that don't really click yet. You got to give them maybe not as much time, but have them doing mental reps, have them, staying behind people, making sure that they're understanding what's going on, so that when you do say it a different way and it does click, they pick it up and they can roll with it.
Well, go ahead, Champ.
No, there's a couple quotes there where it talks about perceptual flexibility. where it talks about how the expectations you do have originally are what you kind of go off of, but they can adapt over time. That flexibility is kind of what creates a more elite athlete, or creates a higher expectation for that player, and kind of develops a relationship more so as you go along.
Right.
Jamie, do you have anything you want to add from that chapter, since we're about halfway through here?
No, I'm good. I think we covered everything, and the only thing that I would stress to you guys that I took from it is realistic expectations for the kids and moving forward. Understand where we are right now and where do we want to be, and that helps build the relationships that we want with our kids. And this is where you are right now, and this is where do you want to be? Do you want to be a college athlete? Do you want to finish out your high school career? Or do you want to be Johnny Clipboard guy and hold the clipboard the entire time we play? And either they're all great kids and they all can benefit, but at the same time, we got, realistically, where do they want to be and where can we take them? Right. And that's my whole thing on this. So.
Right. Okay.
I agree.
All right, Tyler, do you want to go next?
Yeah. So starting part 2, we're talking about race. Chapter 9 with Copeland. First question I want to ask is, the title of the chapter asks if ethnicity and race are important in sports, and based on the reading, in your mind, are they? Is that something that plays a factor into your sport?
I'll go. First of all, these couple the race chapter and the white privilege, these are all like loaded topics right now,
Right.
With everything that's going on. And I think that you have to have thoughtful answers to these. And sometimes that's hard to do, especially if you aren't a minority. But I would say, I think that we would be lying to ourselves to say that we're not aware of our athletes' ethnicity and race. I mean, I think that would just be ignorant to say that you're unaware of it and how it makes you view your kids. Because again, it's not something that you're doing purposefully. But I do think it's important, and I do think that we have to acknowledge it and be aware of, what does that mean to us when we acknowledge that we see this kid as a minority or we see this kid a certain way. How are we handling that, and how does it influence the decisions that we're making?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I mean, to say it's not important is not right at all. It's definitely out there and everything, and I try to not ever involve it or anything, but if you completely ignore it, then I just don't see how that's a possibility. Now, I don't think that race or ethnicity is either one of them is more important than the other, but to completely ignore it as a coach, especially now, is just not a possibility.
Well, tell me this: why would understanding like the history and heritage of another person help diffuse the racial ideology that may be going on your team or in your ideas?
I'll answer that, because I think, honestly, if I understand your background and where you came from and the struggles that may have been involved in that process, or, that kind of thing, it makes a difference in how I view you. And I'm talking about if I'm your teammate. I'm not talking about from a coaching perspective. If I know that Amanda came from a single family or single parent home, that's kind of different. I'm not going to send her a text message on Father's Day with a selfie when her dad died, or anything like that. So I think understanding that history and that heritage leads to, and if I'm a leader and I'm a captain on a team, and I know that Champ's mom died, then I'm going to try to hang out with him on Mother's Day and invite him to my house, to hang out with me and my family, to do something so he's not sitting at home thinking about it. So there's things that I think that bridges the gap when what's going on, and what has went on.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree. I think like you kind of took from it, Jamie. You're trying to build that bridge. So, and what you really want for your players is you want them to understand the bigger picture. You want them to understand how their actions, how the actions of others affect you as well as others around you, which is the ultimate goal, in my opinion. I mean, that's what's going to take them further in life than kicking a ball or throwing it for that matter.
Right.
I think understanding where somebody comes from, their heritage, it makes that person human to you. It's not just that person over there. That is a person now that I know something about, and I actually can empathize or I care about that person. And that's a different level of connection than just knowing that, yeah, I have a black teammate over here, I have a Hispanic teammate over here. It's a different level of connection to know the background of that person.
Yeah, understanding anyone's background is going to help you as a coach, as a friend, as anything. So there's no way that knowing more about them, knowing where they came from, knowing what they've been through, I mean, it's going to help them every time. It's going to help a coach, teacher, anybody.
Well, to me, ignorance is not understanding,
Right.
and refusing to understand.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is ignorance. So when I'm not trying to even reach out to anyone that's different than I am, so to speak, and I think that's what, we're going to allude to it later. That's what white privilege, that's what it's talking about, is this is the norm. So if the way I was raised is the way it's supposed to be, then I'm ignorant into everything that is involved with you. So what kind of teammate am I if I don't understand, or I don't try to understand where you came from and what you go home to every night? There's kids that we take home every night and go pick up a double cheeseburger because they don't have that. They're not going to eat when they get home. Our kids go to school to eat. So if we don't try to understand where they come from as players, as coaches, then how can they understand what we're trying to do as coaches?
Right. And then this kind of leads into this. On page 306, the author points out that the most significant forms of racial and ethnic exclusion happen in the community. Okay. And I know, on teams and stuff, a lot of times they're united, but how do we incorporate the community to not be ignorant in that fact?
Well, man, I'll start that one off. So when I first skimmed through that, the first thing I thought was country club sport. So like you're swimming, you're golf, tennis, things like that. That take a lot of money. Now think about who's up there. I mean, that's exactly where my mind went when I read this. So there were so many things that if you don't have the wealth coming in, you can't play, you can't participate. I mean, there's so many things that youth sports have it wrong completely because they base it on that. Like if you can't provide transportation, you can't go, you can't play. So I think there's so much there that, I mean, I think the exact quote was, they drop these programs, they mask these true intentions. Basically, it's segregation that you're saying you can't play. Oh, too bad you can't get there. That you can't pay for it, you can't play. That's what it is, essentially.
Right. You can't pay the fees. You can't buy clubs. You can't whatever it's going to be.
Let's go and not to talk about past experience. I'm coaching in a town right now that has 2 middle schools that was consolidated in '95. So we have Waycross Middle and Ware Middle. One is the baseball school, and one is the football, basketball, track school. So you understand what I'm saying? So how do we make that in the community? I go to Waycross Middle football games. I go to Waycross Middle baseball games. I go to Ware Middle baseball games. I go to Ware Middle football games. So in the community, you have to be seen in all areas. And I don't think you can pick and choose. Now, Ware Middle is the baseball school, but I can't only go to that school game.
Right. And that brings me kind of to the last little point with this on page 113. What does this author mean by critical awareness? Like, what does he mean by that?
I think he's talking about, instead of disregarding the topic, he's saying tackle it head on.
Yeah, I feel what you're saying.
It's critical. It's don't brush it under the rug. There's eventually it's going to be a mountain when you have to deal with it. You may never have to deal with it, but if you keep brushing it, it's going to be a mountain. So hit it up head on and address it. You know, these are my coaching principles. This is what I want our team to be about. This is what I want our program to be about. We're a family. And I think all of us as coaches, you know, we preach that we're a family. So go, you know, if we preach that as a family, then we're moving forward. You're not going to do anything to harm a family member, you know?
Right. And my take on that, Tyler, was that I think being aware is kind of like the first step in this whole thing. And I think that by the author saying critical awareness, I think it means literally to be critical of your awareness. Like, just because you are now aware doesn't mean you understand. It doesn't mean you can identify. It doesn't mean you can explain it. So take your awareness and then analyze that. That's how I take it.
Well, as far as race and stuff, that's all I have. You know, going into the next part, Amanda, talking about white privilege.
Okay. All right. So, again, hot topic right now, and, you know, probably should have been for a long time, but we can all relate right now to this. The author says that white privilege should absolutely be implemented in coaching education programs. And what do y'all feel about that? Should those controversial topics be included in coaching education and any kind of professional development that we have?
Am I the one? I couldn't hear you, man. Can you say it one more time?
I said, what's the problem?
I think your speakers are loud.
Okay, so the author says in the white privilege chapter that controversial topics like white privilege should be implemented in coaching education programs. And my question was, should it? You know, do we agree with the fact that it should? Because it really is controversial and it's hard for a lot of people to understand.
I would completely agree that it should be implemented. I mean, it's hard to understand, especially just me being white my whole life and not understanding clearly. Just it's something that you have to learn over time, and it's a topic that's very, very touchy right now, but it's also a topic that has truth to it, or else it wouldn't be there right now. So I think everybody needs to be educated on it. And there's definitely facts and proof to it, as the authors mentioned. I mean, what's the rule in the NFL right now to interview at least
the Rudy rule.
The Rudy rule. So that's what I'm saying. There's rules put in place because it was a true thing. So I completely agree with it. It's hard for me to understand it sometimes, especially now that I'm older. I don't struggle with it, but probably 10 years ago, I would have just thought I was a good coach, and that's why I was being hired. But it's definitely something that exists, and it needs to keep getting attention.
I think it shows vulnerability. If you admit that you don't have or you don't quite understand, I mean, the fact that you open yourself up to wanting to understand, especially as a younger coach. I mean, same boat as you, Matt. Like, if I'd have gone back 7, 8 years ago, this would have been an entirely different topic where you just don't understand, or you don't, because you haven't been in that point. You don't understand that vantage point. Fortunately, playing a sport that has so many different ethnicities and different races, that's something that I was very privileged to experience growing up. So, I mean, that's one that I enjoy getting to know those things. So it's something that hopefully that the kids that I get to work with understand that, you know, I've been to a lot of different events, seen a lot of things that, man, it's something that, you know, don't judge me on my skin as well, because I'm open to learn everything about you as well.
Well, and I think that's the way it should be, is, you know, not getting so entrenched in what you are and how you act and what you do, but open yourself up to other cultures, you know, other ways of thinking, and trying to, I know it's hard to put yourself in their shoes sometimes because you don't know what other people go through because of whatever the case may be. But, you know, at a school that our team is 98% African-American, we have to make sure that we are stepping outside of our comfort zone and trying to understand, you know, what it's like to be them sometimes. And as a good coach, if you can find ways to relate to your players in that way, you can, one, build trust, with your players, but also, you know, they look at you as like, hey, he cares, you know, and if kids think you care about them, they'll work for you.
Well, in reading this chapter, you know, it talks about, as a head coach, what is white privilege? Well, white privilege may be you chastise a kid for having a different haircut than the way you cut your hair. You know, and me not, as a young coach, I worked for a guy, and not going into history, but he had a problem with the way kids wore their hair because he was a Marine. And you hide your hair in the front. If your hat was here, you couldn't see hair down here. So, but what happens with the kid that's, you know, throwing 95 off the mound that has dreads down to here? I'm sorry, you don't have to cut your hair. You know, but at the same time, we all need to understand that, guess what? His dread is part of his heritage. You know, that's his race. You know, and it has nothing, because I shave my head doesn't mean I'm white or anything like that, or you know, that kind of crap. But the author also talks about colorblindness. You know, well, we were all raised to be colorblind, but if we're colorblind, then all we see is the norm. So coming from where I've coached in the past to where I am now, I've been forced to realize that there is a color difference. And, you know, and I'm working in our program right now to fix the fact that a mother in projects can buy one football and 25 kids can play. But you go try to play baseball or one soccer ball or whatever, you got to have 25 different clubs. Right. So how does that, you know, that's part of the race and white privilege and the country club sports that you know, everybody's talking about is, you know, the country club people can buy a set of golf clubs. But what are we doing as coaches to identify those athletes that can do the country club sports that maybe can't afford it? And I think that's where our booster clubs and how we run our programs and have that support network for those kind of kids is important, you know.
Absolutely.
I agree, Jamie. And one of the things I was going to say, you know, we talked about the Rooney Rule a few minutes ago. I'm pretty sure, and I don't know, this is just me, let's say hypothetically, because I don't know for sure, that most head coaches in Georgia are white. Let's just say that, of all sports. If that's the case, then we do need to be educated on white privilege and how that frame affects the kids that we coach who are not white. Because I would venture to say that the majority of head coaches in Georgia are probably white. And I don't know that for a fact, but just because of that, I think there should be some education. But the question
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, man. I was going to say another thing about white privilege that the author said was that a lot of people that do feel white privilege are afraid to talk about white privilege, racism, and other things. And I completely agree with that as well. Like you mentioned, most of the coaches maybe are white. I have no idea, but if they're extremely afraid of talking about anything like that, then that's exactly why they need to be educated on the subject.
Absolutely.
Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's good. That kind of helps me with the next question I had. So my question then from reading this about white privileges or white privilege, the author suggests that coaches should be responsible for applying their understanding with their athletes. And I mean, should we? Are we responsible for educating our athletes on racial issues and white privilege, etc.? What do y'all think?
Something that we've done, and I know I'm going to fuss about past experiences or whatever, but something that you can do is have your athletes tell about where they come from. Like, you know, what are some things that you do as a family in your home that you do to celebrate whatever it is that you do? And I think that helps educate the kids in the fact that, hey, you know, this is how we do things, but they do things differently. But the way they do it is fine. But giving the kids ownership into and express how, how they celebrate holidays, what holidays they, because we're not all the same. And that's good, because if we were all the same, I know for me, I wouldn't want to sit around with me and talk to me all day long. I want to get to know different people. That's why we're special. But I think that's one way that we can do as coaches, give the athletes the bridge to tell about what, how different they really are, and to educate each other.
All right, y'all. In the spirit of moving things along, I just will say that finally the author talked about 3 areas that coaches could use in order to kind of, like we said earlier, bridge the gap. Intrapersonal knowledge, so knowing within yourself what frame you're looking at life through, what frame you're looking at your kids through. Interpersonal knowledge, so that's you connecting with someone else. And then I think the last one's the most important, is the sustained dialogue, continuing to acknowledge it and not letting it be a topic that dies down and seems unimportant. So I don't know if y'all had any final thoughts on that. You could share those before we move on to Champ.
Well, I don't think it's white privilege, so to speak, but I think it's your job as a coach. Going back to the professional, the national coaching standards, whatever. We've been tasked as coaches to build relationships with our players. Doesn't matter what race, what ethnicity that they're involved in. I think the more we can show that we care about them, they're going to work for us. And I use work as they're going to put in the effort that's required. And then we're also, I've coached kids that just want to be a part of something. So, and I've coached kids that, by God, Coach Hammonds, I want you there on Sunday afternoon to throw me baseballs so that I can go play college at the Division I level. So at the same time, we've got to understand that and being able to see where they come from and build those relationships of what are they looking for. And I think ultimately what this whole thing is about is white privilege does exist. Do we handle it as coaches? I think we spearhead everything off and just talk about race. And we're a family. We're moving forward. We are us. And we're going to appreciate everything that Joe is about, Jenny is about, Jason is about, and we're going to move forward together because we have a common set of goals that is a part of our program philosophy.
Yeah, I think it piggybacks on what you were saying, the sustained dialogue. So it's not so much a debate, it's a discussion. So can we have that discussion and be open-minded and understand versus trying to put one over the other? Are you ready for the last one, emotion?
We're ready.
Oh, boy. All right, so we have our final article here. What is emotion, or towards an emotional understanding of coaching practice? So this one had a lot of words I had to go and look up. What is the process of how emotions and acting contribute to burnout in coaches? What are y'all's thoughts on burnout in coaches?
I think, well, the reading talked about unpredictable and uncontrollable circumstances. I think that's one, because if you're a coach, you know that there's a lot of emotion wrapped up in that. The thing I added to what the author said about the uncontrollables was having inaccurate expectations. If your expectations do not fit what happens on the field or on the court or even within the season or even your coaching career, that can really be emotionally taxing. It can be an emotional roller coaster. So that's kind of how I viewed that.
Yeah, I added experience into that as well. The first few years, oh man, I was very emotional about every single thing that happened. The older I've gotten, sometimes the kids or players just don't play well. So you definitely need to be emotional. You need to be passionate about your game. But at the same time, just you need to control them. You need to understand just some days are just not great days. Some days are great days. But either way, control your emotions, love the kids, and just keep going with it.
I'm going to tell myself real quick. My wife gets on to me all the time. Quit being a crybaby. Why are you crying about balls and strikes? He's doing his job. You do yours. Your players feed off of your emotions. And
I can see you doing that, Jamie.
So she's like, and she sits in the coach's wife's coaching box behind where I'm calling pitches. So I'm doing this, and I'm barking at the, where's that at, Jeff? You know, and just being a prick about it sometimes. And she's like, Jamie, shut up. It's over. Move on. But players are feeding off of that. You know, we had a bad season 2 years ago. So players do feed off of how, you know, if they score 2 in the first, all right, we're screwed, we're done, game's over. You know, but at the end of the day, players do feed off of us. So it is important how we act.
Talking about burnout or whatever, I'll tell you, one of the best things to do as a coach is to coach another sport. Try something different, because it'll make you realize, you know, the way that I coach golf, I can't coach golf the way I coach football. So it made me a better football coach being a golf coach, because now I've learned to sit back, get all the information first before I just go yelling and screaming, going nuts, and to be more patient. To be more patient is a big thing.
Tyler, you're right, because I was the head baseball coach, and then I was the assistant softball coach. So went from coaching boys to coaching girls. So that's completely different in emotions and dealing with their emotions, and so-and-so broke up with me. You know, that kind of, and so-and-so took my ex-boyfriend on a date. You know, you're dealing with all that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Coaching girls may be a better coach. No argument. Way better. Got to learn how to communicate, man.
Absolutely.
Well, try yelling at a golfer the way that, like, first day I'm yelling at golfers and stuff, the way I yell at football, and I realize real quick that ain't going to work. So,
so I'll move along to question number 2 here. So, how is emotion viewed in coaching? So, this y'all kind of touched on a little bit, and we can kind of go bounce. I got a couple different ideas we can talk about, but I'll let you guys go first.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, it's definitely important to be emotional, but then I think, I can't remember now. It's been a long conversation, but someone mentioned that athletes definitely pick up on your emotion, and I agree with it. If it's a positive emotion, sure, but if your players constantly see that you're being negative and causing problems, I really do think that they just go ahead and start just giving into that as well. So I think you got to continue just positive emotions or show no emotions at all. But if you're constantly riding the negativity train, then it's going to affect your players.
I agree, Matt. And I kind of took another spin on that. You know, like, I think people also view it as like, if you're not screaming, yelling, pulling your hair out for 4 quarters or 2 halves or whatever it is, then you're not coaching. You know, I think if you're just calm, and maybe that's not your style, I think people might not think that you're, you know, invested and you're not coaching hard. But I think emotion is one of the best tools that we can use. But I think, you know, in all the professional development that we have, you're not really taught how to manage it. Most of us just go with what our personality dictates. So I don't know. I think from the outside looking in, people could view that a little differently.
One of the things I like to do as far as emotion, I like to be animated during practice and make practice harder than a game. And then when the game occurs, I want to sit back and be positive quality. Hey, this is you know, you're prepared for this. Don't let it overwhelm you. Let's circle the wagons. Let's go at this together. Let's get after this pitcher. He may be going to Georgia or Florida or Vanderbilt. I don't care. Let's get after him, you know, because we're prepared. We practice for this. And then be, you know, supportive in game. And then in practice, you know, I know, Johnny, that's not right. And let him know that I'm not happy with what he's doing, you know?
Good deal. Good deal. So I was going to kind of touch on there about how you deal with athletes versus like stakeholders, so boosters, but I think we're running pretty well on time right here. Question 3, how can it be used as a coaching tool, both positively and negatively? So some things to think about are obviously parents. Yeah, parents for one is where I went first and foremost. Fire away. I wish we could share experiences.
I know.
Well, parents on that, be careful what you say to the kid. Hey, Johnny, you're getting better. Well, Johnny's going to go sit at the kitchen table while he's eating his, lasagna that mom made. How was practice? And Johnny's gonna say, well, Mom, it was, Coach says I'm getting better. I may get an opportunity, if I keep getting better. Well, Johnny's not getting better, but as a coach, you're just trying to get Johnny better, and Johnny's not getting better.
And the thing is, everybody knows that scenario.
Yeah.
That's why you are all laughing. Johnny, what you forgot?
Look at that kid right here.
Donated $5,000 to the program this year. So how do you're not going to cut that kid either. So Johnny's getting better.
Absolutely.
Champ, do you have any concluding thoughts on that before we wrap up, or anybody else have something to say on Champ's questions?
I'll go first. I can go last. It's no big deal.
Okay. Go for it.
All right, fire away to me. All right, so when it was dealing with a lot of the things it was talking about burnout, the whole putting on a face of trying to act, so to speak, and try to make it work when it doesn't really work, if you're not emotionally invested, was kind of what I took up from this. So you're putting on that front to kind of get through it every day. Because that labor to appease the group, appease the in front of you, it can really lead to you alienating yourself. It can really lead to that burnout that we talked about. So like you were kind of saying, I think, Amanda, how you don't see a lot of those coaches that are on the sidelines screaming and yelling into their 60s and 70s on the sidelines, especially like basketball. I can think of none that do that, and they are very effective. Because it's got to be something that is acceptable, but also what is valuable. Is it going to be effective for me to have this motion, this response to whatever we're talking about? If not, then why am I putting this type of effort in? It's something that we really do need to self-evaluate when it comes to dealing with other people. I had a couple about teaching, but I think we're good on that. Communication at the personal level. That's the biggest thing that we can get to. And that's about it for mine.
All right, y'all have anything to add before we wrap up?
That was good. Nope.
All right, good discussion.